Welcome to the Scarlet Faithful Podcast. I'm your host, co-founder, Aaron Breitman. Happy Monday, June 5th, 2023. I definitely have the case of the Mondays. A little foggy mid-afternoon here, but plenty to talk about in the Rutgers world. And just wanted to kind of run through some football recruiting, basketball recruiting, some other basketball news, and kind of go about that. So just talking about football recruiting. And the way recruiting is right now with so many recruits that visited this past weekend, took official visits. I believe the final count was 23. Rutgers had a ton of prospects. I had mentioned on Friday, I really think that there's a lot of positive things going on right now with Rutgers football recruiting. They had a pretty solid and some real top tier recruits, but the list as a whole was pretty good. And they got 3 commits so far. So, by the time this gets out, we could have 1 or 2 more commits before the day is done. I'll obviously cover that on the scarletfaithful.com, but we'll see what happens. But having 3 linemen, 1 on the offensive side, 2 on the defensive side. First on Saturday, you had the 3-star offensive lineman. What was his name? Raynor Andrews. All 3 from Florida, all 3 from Miami, all 3 from Norland High School. Raynor Andrews, from people I hear speak with and had read about and watched his film, people are really high on him. I think he can. Obviously, offensive linemen take a while, right? But he could develop into a full-time starter at Rutgers on the offensive line as a tackle right now. So that was a really good get. And to have a Florida visitor like that and, commit in the middle of the visit is a really positive sign. So I thought that was great. And then you had the brothers, the twins, the Lumen twins, Ty Cool Hill and Ty Clean, both from Miami. They're actually Canadian. They've played in Miami high schools the last 2 years. They just transferred to Norland in the spring. But Miami, South Florida is loaded. And they both have had double-digit sack totals the last 2 seasons. They have a really good offer list, as did Andrews. But these guys, have close to 20 offers. A lot of high major Power 5 offers there, including the SEC, Auburn, Arkansas. They were set to go to visits to Louisville and Pitt. They've since canceled. So big news there. Both edge rushers, help on the defensive line. So Rutgers now has 11 commits in the class of 24. And as we speak right now with the 24/7 Sports composite rankings, Rutgers has the 19th ranked class in the country. So obviously, yes, impressive. But I do want to stress patience, because rankings right now are always kind of front loaded in terms of who has the most commits, right? So if you look at the top 25 right now, of course you have Georgia number 1, 4 5-stars and 7 4-stars. Michigan has just 1 5-star, but 10 4-stars. They're number 2, right? But when you start to go down the list, it gets where my point is trying to be made is Minnesota is ranked 14th right now nationally. They have 0 5-star recruits committed, and they have 0 4-star recruits committed. They have 14 3-star recruits committed. Wake Forest 15th has 14 3-star recruits committed. That's it. Iowa has 2 4-stars and 9. You have Pitt 1 4-star, 11, and then Rutgers 19. They have 11 3-star commits. So my long-winded point here is that once the top guys start committing to these programs, you're going to go down the line. Rutgers needs to get probably 3 or 4 4-star guys, and maybe that's shooting too high. But you have guys like Corey Duff, D.D. Holmes. He's an edge rusher as well, but he's going to South Carolina next weekend. But these are high-end guys that would obviously boost the class ranking quite a bit. So it's not really about where you're ranked. It's about your overall player grade average, and that's where you're ultimately going to finish. So Rutgers right now, I think is tracking. They're probably tracking a top 40 class, but they're not going to stay in the top 20. And I know people want to get their victories with the tweets right now, and I'm not going to do that because it's way too early. And it's tracking as a top 40 class, not a top 20 class. That's not to say there's not some really encouraging players committed to this class already. Kenny Jones, the offensive lineman from Delran, was the first committed to the class. I really like him. And obviously, Kenny Fletcher is looking really good from Delran as well. Then you have AJ Cerise, who I think is super underrated and has done really well in camps in the circuit this spring and summer. I think is going to be a really good get for Rutgers. So there's a lot of talent there. I mean, you have Gabe Winovich from Michigan. He's a 4-star by some services. I believe 24/7 Sports actually ranks him as a 4-star, but as a composite, he's only at a 3-star. But he is the highest rated recruit in the class right now. He's rated as an athlete. I think he's going to end up as a running back, but there's a lot of talent in this recruiting class for sure. And, rankings were always a grain of salt. We know that. But all I'm saying is there's a long way to go. They have a full list of visitors coming in next weekend as well. But this month is hugely critical for Greg Schiano and the coaching staff to land as good of a class as they can get, right? And listen, top 40, it's nothing to, still should appreciate it. I mean, things were really lean a few years ago, it's 60 to 70 range. But yes, to really move up the ladder of the Big Ten, you need repeatable top 25 classes, top 30 classes year after year. And Rutgers isn't there yet, but you got to start somewhere, and perhaps this class can get there. We'll see. Moving on to basketball recruiting. Let's see. Big weekend. They had Bryce Dorsch, 4-star wing, on campus. He said some positive things to the recruiting services. We'll see what happens there, but this is a guy they've recruited for over 2 years. They've kept warm the whole time. As soon as Delquan Warren decommitted, they had him scheduled for an official visit. So I think that's a really good sign. And, he's from the Massachusetts area. He plays on the New England prep circuit. They love that circuit. He's made a lot of progress. All the New England kind of analysts and people that I know have raved about him. If you watch his film, I mean, he can create his own shot. He's a dynamic scorer. He defends. He's got length. He's super athletic. He would I think he's a kind of on paper and on film, he looks like the perfect kind of fit for Peichel in terms of how he wants to play, defend multiple positions. And, I think he's an underrated scorer. So, he's not the best shooter per se, but he really gets to the rim in different ways. And for his age right now, going into his senior year, I think he's only going to develop into a better scorer. So really excited about him, hoping they can land him. If they add him, he's right on the fringe of the top 100. Add him to the top 2024 class. You have Ace Bailey. You have Lathan Somerville. Dylan Harper, now other national analysts, crystal balling, projecting him to go to Rutgers. Probably won't hear anything until July, but it's still looking very good. I mean, those 4, you replace Dortch with Warren, and it's actually a better balanced class because Dortch is a wing. He can defend multiple positions. Warren really was a prototypical defensive first point guard. And it was a little bit redundant. If Harper does come, he's going to have the ball in his hands a lot. So then you go get a wing. You can never have enough wings, especially the way Peichel wants to play, positionless. You can never have enough wings. And I just think, and I know I've said this before, but getting Dortch in so quickly and having kept him warm for literally years, having offered him, in 2021, I think it just, again, reinforces the message that Peichel and the coaching staff, Brandon Knight, TJ Thompson, they're just so well prepared. They have contingencies for contingencies, and they know what they're doing, and they're getting positive responses from really good players now, and that helps. And they've worked really hard to get there, and it's happening. So, yes, NIL continues to be a focus. However, I think if they can get Dortch to commit, it just shows that they're going to be just fine, and there's going to be losses along the way. Talking about Cam Spencer a little bit, that's, I think, going to come to a head this week in terms of his decision. It's sounding like Miami or UConn. I don't even know if he's going to take that Oklahoma visit, or if he already did, but it doesn't sound like that's, and that I thought was weird on the list. And UCLA, I'm not quite sure, but it sounds everything like Miami, UConn. I think both are good situations for him. But my point is, I think he is really kind of the poster boy for what the portal is like now and what NIL is like and how quickly things can change, just in terms of a guy that everyone had penciled in. It was a complete shock to everyone that he left. It was NIL motivated, as I've been saying since the news hit. And he's got two pretty good choices now. But that's a guy that, is he going to benefit on the court? He left a very, very good situation. Rutgers brings in Noah Fernandes to really complement and I think put Cam in a much better position going into next year in terms of how he would be used and also defended. And he left. He left for NIL, and good for him. But we'll see what happens. But I think that is a kind of poster boy for what the portal NIL is like right now. And you know what? Unfortunately, it happened to Rutgers. But again, Peichel, he's just showing that he's resilient, he's organized, and he is going to move this program forward despite the challenges, whatever comes their way. He does have a podcast out today. I haven't had a chance to fully cover it yet. I was going to play some clips, but I'm just not ready to do that yet. But he talks both about the coaching staff, which was also formally announced today. So Marlon Williamson is officially part of the staff. He also had some internal promotions. Scott Schur and Mike Sasso have been promoted. They were grad assistants. And then also Mike Larkin and Steve Hain are going to have bigger roles moving forward. There's a new rule now where NCAA can have some additional staff help with practice and on-court responsibilities. So Larkin and Hain are going to do more there. But I love the internal, promotions and just cultivating within. I mean, TJ Thompson was brought in, obviously previous relationships to Peichel and also Carl Hobbs, played for Hobbs and Peichel at GW. But he's been a huge win as an assistant coach, and he's kind of the number two guy now. So Williamson, has big shoes to fill. We'll see what happens there. But Peichel focused on his AAU connections, which I thought was interesting. Talking about recruiting, he doesn't always do that in terms of kind of emphasize recruiting benefits, but also talked about his ability to develop talent. So coaching staff news there. Wanted to make sure I didn't miss anything. Recruiting wise with basketball. So Joey Hart, a 3-star shooter out of Indiana. News came out from Jeff Goodman this weekend. I wrote about it on Scarlet Faithful, just in terms of him being targeted. There's speculation came out Sunday that he's a silent commit for Kentucky. And then there was a report Sunday night he was on campus in Indiana. So Rutgers was the third school mentioned in that mix. And again, from my perspective, in terms of recruiting and perception, when Rutgers is continually being mentioned with these other top schools, yes, you want Rutgers to get all their top targets, but this is kind of the end of recruiting cycle type situation. They obviously need a shooter for next year. I do expect them to land a shooter out of the portal ultimately, but it's, again, great to see Peichel exploring all avenues, exploring all options, and being in the mix with Kentucky and Indiana. If you said that 5 years ago, you'd laugh in my face. Will they get him to Piscataway? Who knows? I got a lot of messages. Oh, what are you talking about? He's a silent commit to Kentucky, and then boom, he's on campus in Indiana. Who knows? He could be Piscataway tomorrow. We don't know. So that's the other thing with recruiting. Just you never know these days. There's so many reports out there. There's so many things said, and there's a lot of guerrilla warfare behind the scenes that were some things never come to light. So never rule out anything, but I just love that Rutgers is in the mix for this kid. I really like the look of him. He's super athletic. He dunks with authority. He can create his own shot, and he's a tremendous shooter. He's got a really high release point. I don't know if it's going to happen. I probably would lean towards it not happening, but again, just the fact that they're in the mix for this kid. He was a Central Florida commit. He asked for his release. Again, who knows if it was a Cam Spencer situation. He got lured out by one school, and now all of a sudden all these other schools are in the mix. But we'll see what happens there. But Rutgers is obviously doing everything they can. We're waiting on Dortch. We're waiting on a big man. We're waiting on a shooter. We're waiting on Paul Mulcahy, who, by the way, was at the NIL Summer, or is still there, and received an award this past weekend for his contributions, or I guess how he properly utilized NIL. It's obviously it was a legendary story in terms of how he paid it back, so to speak, in terms of rewarding all the ushers and security at the rack following his last game last year, in terms of giving them gift cards, which was just an amazing gesture. And he was kind of recognized for that by the NIL Summit, just in terms of, I believe, his best use of NIL. And I'm just trying to find the actual tweet here. I apologize. But just in terms of him being able to give it back, in terms of pay it back, not obviously all his NIL money, but just his use of his NIL in such a positive way, was great to see. And it was great to see him recognized nationally at that level as well. So we're still waiting on his ultimate decision. We'll see what happens there. But, like I said, from day one, I'm pretty optimistic that he will return. And, it's just a wait and see. Got to give him space. He's obviously got a lot of things going on. He's, at this right now. So I'm sure it's worked out with Peichel in terms of either what the decision is or when the timeline will be. But I wouldn't be too concerned that we don't know yet. I think it's going to come to light sooner rather than later. And I am optimistic he's going to come back. Let's see, what else do we have here? I kind of skipped through some things. Oh, one other thing that Peichel mentioned on the podcast, we should definitely check out, and I'll link here. And I'm going to have a separate article later, I think. But he mentioned a Barclays game. They're working on a neutral game. That's with a high major at Barclays this coming season. I had mentioned previously in other podcasts that I thought Rutgers was going to add at least one additional neutral court game against a high major, possibly two. I think there was another one that is probably going to fall through, but I think they might add another neutral court game, not necessarily against a high major. So there's a lot of things still going on. I think the schedule is definitely going to be better than it was last year. And people might not be fully satisfied, but I still think the schedule is going to be better. And hopefully there's some news. He did mention on the podcast that contracts are being finalized before anything can be formally announced. I think June's a big month. We're going to hear on the basketball roster. We're going to hear more on the schedule, football recruiting. And then I really did want to end on kind of an anecdote with Athlon Sports. They're putting things out about their preview. They tease it now. They put out different tidbits throughout the past week or so. And today they posted their anonymous quotes from assistant coaches talking about other programs. And they had a pretty negative one about Rutgers. It really wasn't anything we don't know already. It was just saying that Schiano being back hasn't been able to, elevate Rutgers to where they were when they were in the Big East. Talks about not going into the portal for a quarterback, which, I've harped on a little bit this offseason. Did say very nice things about Kirk Shiraka and said he got thrown under the bus by Penn State when he was there, by James Franklin. That was interesting. But more or less just said that, he hasn't elevated Rutgers to where I guess everybody kind of hoped and thought he would. So, nothing surprising. I tweeted and made a joke that, I thought you could go on any Rutgers message board and you could pull that quote. It really wasn't anything unique or maybe as spicy as they thought it was going to be. But I think it's just ridiculous to use an anonymous quote from an assistant coach. It's just, it's kind of Bush League. And it's kind of petty for an assistant coach to say all that. There's people speculating, on Twitter who it is. And, I saw Chris Partridge's name mentioned several times, the old Paramus Catholic head coach, now an assistant at Michigan. And it was a Big Ten assistant that said this. I don't think it's him. I don't think he would say that about Schiano. I think that they are in good terms. And I also don't know why he would prop up Kirk Shiraka. So, it sounded pretty pro Minnesota to me. And perhaps, I don't know if maybe someone at Minnesota is. It did talk about Schiano sticking to the defensive philosophy he had at Ohio State, but it not working at Rutgers because they don't have the same talent. Joe Harasimiak is a defensive coordinator now from Minnesota. Kirk Shiraka is now the offensive coordinator. Who knows if there's, something there. I don't know, but I just thought that the complaint about Penn State was interesting. I know some people are speculating it's Indiana. Whoever it is, it's stupid. It's just really stupid to publish that as a respected college football preview publication. I just think it's silly. So I'm going to end it there. I covered a lot of ground. Appreciate everybody that's listening and watching to the podcast. Thank you for those that read all my content at thescarletfaithful.com. You can find me on Twitter at Aaron_Breitman. We're on Instagram, the Scarlet Faithful, and we'll be back tomorrow with another episode and plenty of content in the meantime being posted on the scarletfaithful.com. I hope you have a better Monday as we get into the week, and I'll talk to you tomorrow.